everybody. It's Thursday.
And welcome to this week's edition of The Night Bite.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Emily. Josh is laughing at me because I think it's the time change has me all honestly messed up. Why you're laughing? No, because it's still so light out. I mean, the last few weeks that we've been coming to, it has been the evening, like dark, and I think that's why in some cases it's so easy for people to wind down and join in with us. So if you are still here with us this evening, and not out enjoying this beautiful weather, it's still pretty decent out there, right? Then we are glad to be here as well.
Yeah. So this is a pretty fun topic. It's something that we don't normally touch on. It's something a little bit more habitat and environmentally based topic. So, if you have questions or you have comments, just put them in there and we'd really like to hear from you on this one because it's something that, most of you know that I'm a natural resource professional and I feel pretty passionate about conserving our habitat, especially as a panfish angler. Those of you out there that are panfish anglers, know how important that shoreline is. And yeah, so we just wanted to talk about it tonight.
But we always do start out with a fishing report. And to be honest, it's been an awful long time since we've touched the water. And so I think the last few weeks we've been bringing maple syrup updates. And that's been really fun, tapping the trees and collecting all the sap and boiling it down. But we'll be honest, we are at the very last step of just filtering and bottling and just finishing. So even things outside are cleaned up. It's a huge amount of work. Josh was up for some really late nights. So if you were lucky enough to get some of that syrup, I don't know, then you're lucky. But it's been a really fun process. And as the seasons go, this is that transition. So online, I guess we are seeing a lot of people that are putting away their ice gear. They are finishing up with ice. And I guess there are people who never even really got an ice season. So I'm sorry for those of you that are hearing the rest of us just wind down, right? But everybody has a lot to look forward to with the rivers because there's a lot of fishing that's been going on. And to be honest, I feel like we've been seeing a lot of fish pulled from lakes, I don't know, across kind of what's otherwise the ice belt, southern Wisconsin and stuff. People have been doing great in places where I otherwise haven't seen those fish being caught before. So this is a really exciting time of year.
Yeah, it's kind of unique. You don't normally get to fish some of the pre-spawn panfish in the boat around here, so that'll be interesting. For us in Wisconsin, our sport fish season closed, so on the inland waters, watch yourself. But we are fortunate enough to live by the Winnebago system and the bay, so we're able to take part in that the traditional walleye run. So that's always pretty fun. And just, like we've said in the last couple of weeks, keep your eye on that Wolf River Cam. That's really a fun place to go. If you haven't heard of that before, just type in Wolf River Cam in Google and you can find it. They have a Facebook page. They post updates. It's a very cool thing that they do. And our friends over at Aquaview help them do that. And you can keep track of not only walleyes, but sturgeon, suckers. You can see that run happen. There's all kinds of fish, and people catch all kinds of fish. You can take snapshots, of what you see and send it in, and they'll post it once.
Well, and it's fun because you can watch those different cameras at the locations by Shyocton, by New London, by, those different areas. And so you can see the movements of the fish, and to some extent you can track that a little bit. But if you know your location, you're launching from a certain place that coming weekend, that's a really great way to, I guess, guide in your planning of that little bit of a trip. Because I think there are a lot of people, because we are in that transition of the season, they make the trip to come and do these things. And also shout out to people on the Wolf River that are doing or on or whatever, the Wolf River rafts. If you have not been a part of that culture, that's a super unique thing. Keep your eye out for that because that's always a lot of fun to watch as well.
One last PSA I'd like to say is that even though it is kind of warm out, mornings and evenings are still getting kind of chilly. And so if you are participating in your boating activities, make sure that you let your boat drain completely, or at least as complete as you can before you pull it up the ramp, because that's one thing that we totally forget about this time of year is that ice, that there can be a lot of ice buildup pulling boats in and out of the water all day. And even though it might melt off during the day, it can still be slick in the morning and the evening. And so people going on and off in the dark might not have the same advantage that you do if you're going out in the middle of the day. So just, try and keep the boat ramps dry.
And you said one last thing, but it's funny because I was going to give one last.
Oh, geez.
But I feel like this is maybe a secret tip this time of year. We always talk about Wolf River Camp and still do that still. But the other thing that I've become or started to notice as far as a secret fishing weapon, is that a thing, right? But watch Ed the Diver. That's a whole lot of fun. It's really interesting. You can see all the things that he finds in all the different bodies of water and cleans up, right? So that's a great thing in itself, is that he's cleaning up those waterways. But the other thing is he will tell you exactly where he's at. I'm at the Menominee Dam. I'm at the Shawano Dam. I'm at, it's a lot of dams because things collect there. That's funny, but they're very recognizable places. And he is not shy about, being on camera if he's recording fish, if he is, the smallies are bumping into him as he's, because to him, he's there collecting those lures. And like we said, cleaning up those waterways. And so, take note of what fish are around, because that's a really funny way to, again, kind of know what's where during that part of the season. So.
Yeah, and Ed's a great guy anyways, and it's definitely worth a watch. If you haven't seen Ed the Diver, check it out.
And while we're talking about cleaning up waterways, that is, I didn't actually plan that, but a secret perfect segue into our guest. So let's bring him in. Scott, thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate being on the show here tonight. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think tonight is the first night that we have met you, and I think a bunch of people at home as well. So can you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So Scott Rolfs, and I have had the privilege of growing up on Big Cedar Lake down in Washington County. Been there my whole life and very active in the fishing. I will admit to you that I'm generally more familiar with the fishing south of Highway 23 than north of Highway 23. But very avid fisherman, and we'll talk a minute, about Lakes at Stake, but that's the group that we founded and are very involved in the wake boat discussion here in Wisconsin.
Cool.
Okay, and then correct me if I'm wrong, is Highway 23 like what goes through Fond du Lac?
Highway 23 is Fond du Lac going all the way west, and really Green Lake is right below. Big Green is right below 23. So yeah.
Gosh, so even some wonderful fishing in that area.
There is some great fishing in that area, no question. Yep.
And so then you said that you had part in creating this Lakes at Stake.
Yeah, and let me just talk about how we founded this group. And it's a nonprofit organization. We are Wisconsin-based. We only focus on what's going on here in Wisconsin, and we are bipartisan, and we're involved with only one issue. That is to bring about some common sense regulation of wake boats on Wisconsin lakes and rivers. What you see in my background is some underwater photography I did. One of the things that I've gotten older is I enjoy underwater photography with GoPro cameras probably as much as I do fishing. And so when the GoPros came out back in 2010, 2011, I got a GoPro, and what I would do is I'm also a scuba diver and snorkel quite a bit. And I do all of this at Big Cedar Lake, again, in the Washington County area, just north of Milwaukee. What I started doing back in 2011 is I would put a GoPro at selected spots on the bottom of the lake, anywhere from 10 to 20 feet deep of water. And then I would let them run for an hour and see what you get. I mean, it's kind of like fishing, you're looking to see. And we do have a legacy sturgeon population in Big Cedar, so we always kind of on the lookout, see if I could catch one of those passing by on the camera. To kind of bring it here full circle to 2024, there's an area of the lake that I would regularly photograph and film, and that area of the lake very close to where I live. It's on a deep drop off with a big area of very deep weed beds. And I think, going with the name of your show, the crappie love deep weed beds in Big Cedar. And, everybody, for your viewers, those are the areas kind of from 7 feet to 15-foot depth. You get the tall weeds, and that really can hold some nice schools of fish. So I have a special area at Big Cedar, wonderful deep weed bed. And every year I go out starting about May 15th through about July 1st, and I'll film this area. And so I've got about 12 years of archival film. What happened is a couple years ago, as I would go out to film, what I noticed was the deep weed beds were gone. And all of a sudden, everything looks like a moonscape down there. What I did was then I started to network with a lot of the different fishermen who are on Big Cedar or regularly fish Big Cedar. They were reporting the same thing around the lake. They were saying, hey, all the weed beds that we had GPSed, whether for ice fishing or regular boat fishing, they're not there anymore. And so the question is, I kind of went on a journey to figure out, okay, what is happening here? So I had a couple guys tell me, they said, it's actually the guy at Fleet Farm when I was getting some bait. He said, it's the wake boats. And I said, really? Explain to me. And you both familiar? You both are familiar with wake boats, right?
Yeah.
I am, but if you could explain that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I think these are the boats that we all see over the last 5-6 years on Wisconsin lakes and rivers. They're big water ski boats. And what they do is these boats are generally between 19 to 25 feet. So they're not a small boat. They have inside the boat are big water ballast tanks. And when you get out on the water, what you do as a wake boat participant or wake boat owner is you fill those ballast tanks up with water. And generally the ballast tanks on these boats can be 200 to 400 to 500 gallons of water that these boats take on. Now, water weighs about 8 pounds a gallon. So if you do the math, what these boats are doing is they're adding between 2,000 to 4,000 pounds of weight to the boat. The reason for that is then the boats will then start and they will go at about an 8 mile per hour clip along the lake, along the water. And with all of that ballast, they're always in a pre-plane condition. They never get up on if you wake board, you get up on a plane, but generally you wake surf, you get on this pre-plane condition. What it does is it creates waves that are about 2 to 4 feet high. And those are waves that are big enough that someone can ride on a surfboard right behind the boat. And I think pretty much everybody on this stream probably has seen wake boats on their lake. It's a lot of fun. You watch that, your families, kids, etc. They're on the surfboard on the back. They're not being pulled by a tow rope. It's like they're surfing in Hawaii or California or something, and they're having a great time. No one wants to stop people from having a great time out on the water. But one of the big issues is these boats have a lot of what we call externalities with them, which are negative impacts on everybody else on that lake and the lake itself. And so these wake boats have gained in popularity, and the wake boats present two problems here. Trying to get my lighting right, so I'm not always flopping off screen here. Let me just see if I can fix that a little bit there. Wake boats have two big problems with them. One is they push out those big waves. We all see those big waves shoot out. Those are the waves that people are surfing on. Those are called divergent waves. Those waves, let me ask you, have you experienced being in a boat when some wake boat waves hit?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, it's a different experience because University of Minnesota did a study that came out 2 years ago, and they tried to quantify how much larger these waves are in height and how much more powerful, how much more energy they have. And depending on, again, the wake boat operation, speed, etc., what they found is the waves are 3 to 12 times more powerful than a regular ski boat. And with that power, it does a lot of things. It presents a great deal of hazards for fishermen. You're out there, you're casting, and all of a sudden you're used to adjusting yourself as waves come. But these wake boat waves, they punch like Mike Tyson, and they can really knock a boat around. So, talking with fishermen across the state, as I've done here over the past year, a lot of them are talking about this as a safety hazard. Especially if you have, let's say you got grandma, she's up on the bass, up on the front deck. She could fall down, break a hip. Maybe you have little kids on board and they're just learning about fishing, and big wave hits, that boat is flipping and flopping. So you have that issue, which is a safety hazard. For fishermen, though, there's an issue that's going on that we're just starting to learn about. And that is the impact on what's going on under the water. And so these big waves, when they carry across the water, they generally don't lose a lot of energy. And these big waves, they are coming into the shoreline, and the energy has to go somewhere. So the energy, scientifically, this is all proven theory that's been proven as scientific fact for the last 150 years, that wave energy, when it hits the shore, the bottom is what's absorbing the energy. And so you think about it, if you're looking at photos of somebody surfing in Hawaii, you know, those waves come in and they start to come in contact with the bottom. And that's when they really start to pivot up and you get a big surf wave. And so what's happening is they're scouring the bottom in a lot of cases. As they scour the bottom, they are ripping up fish nests, they're stirring up sediment, and they're knocking out deep weed beds. The other area which is a problem is downward prop wash. So as these wake boats are plowing along here on a pre-plane, that it's like a jet engine that's being aimed at the bottom that goes down at about a 30 to 45 degree angle. If these boats are in less than 20 feet of water, they will really rip up everything underneath that boat. Number of studies have come out over the last 5 years of this downward prop wash. And a couple of them have said that the prop wash can affect the bottom as deep as 33 feet. Now, there's a study that's going to come out here any day now from the University of Minnesota. It's called Minnesota Phase 2. The University of Minnesota has been working the last 2 years to study downward prop wash wake boats and compare them to other boats. A lot of times wake boat enthusiasts will say, hey, fishing boats, you know, you're pulling out of the hole, got your bass boat, you're stirring up the bottom just as much as we are. Well, University of Minnesota, when the study comes out again, any day it'll be released, we're really going to get some good data. I don't think that's the case, that the bass boat is causing anywhere near the damage, but those downward prop washes are really rough. So what happened is, as I'm looking here at this, you look at this photo I got in the background here with the crappie. This is an area of Big Cedar that I regularly film, and this was from 2014. We have it. It's up on YouTube that you can watch it. You can go to our website, lakesatstake.org. And this now is a moonscape. There is no vegetation there, no fish. And so it really, be honest, it really got me frustrated as I learned all of these different things. And I networked with people around the state. And what I was finding is everybody has a wake boat story. You know, you may have a wake boat story where they hit the boat hard when you were fishing one day. Someone may have a story where they had little kids wading, swimming, and they got knocked over by some wake boat waves. Other people have different stories. They were kayaking, paddle sports, canoeing, whatever. When a wake boat's out on a lake, it becomes a wake boat lake. I mean, those guys are like driving monster trucks. And so what happened is I networked with enough people who said, hey, we don't have a bipartisan group, one issue group to go at this in Wisconsin. There's different environmental groups that are doing a great job working this issue. There's some homeowner groups that are doing great jobs, but there was nobody statewide that was taking this thing on. So we formed our group in October, and we have since had great reception. You can go visit our website. I'll say it again, lakesatstake.org, or you can see us on Facebook, Lakes at Stake, Wisconsin. But what we've been doing is we actually hired a professional lobbyist for Madison. And interestingly enough, last fall, the wake boat industry tried to sneak through a bill that would codify wake surfing everywhere on Wisconsin lakes in perpetuity. That bill basically said you can wake surf anywhere as long as you're 200 feet offshore, and any local ordinances prohibiting wake surfing on a particular lake or town, those would be invalidated. And so we really jumped in and worked hard to defeat that bill. That bill died. But in the meantime, we really started negotiating with the legislators about, hey, can we get some protections here? And so the result of it is the legislature in Wisconsin is now adjourned. They actually don't come back into session until next January. But what we did is we got a lot of awareness on the issue. We campaigned very strongly for both bans on lakes of smaller acreage and also on larger lakes to have at least keep wake boats a minimum of 500 feet from shorelines. And that would take them out of a lot of bays. They'd keep them away from fishermen. They would take them, frankly, off of some rivers, which was a good thing. Because a lot of rivers, may not have areas that are, not many rivers are 1,000 foot wide. We have 500 feet on each side. So we worked hard on that. The industry spent a lot of money, the wake boat manufacturers, to kind of slow us down. And it was a real knockdown, drag out battle. At the end of the day, we did take a victory in being able to stop that bill that would codify it and prevent local ordinances. And we did get introduced into the Wisconsin State Senate a research bill that would fund the University of Wisconsin to do an extensive study of wake boats and environmental impact, fishing impact, safety impact. Now, that bill is going to have to kind of go through the process here over the next 10 months as far as the budget, Governor Evers, but we got something started. One thing, though, that I want to add, because this is really a key development in this story, is a lot of local towns and lakes do have, all townships and lake districts have the ability to regulate wake surfing on their lakes. They have this power. The DNR has publicly said you have this power. And so a number of lakes have, the last 2 years, started to taking up what they call local ordinances. The one that everybody is very familiar with is what's called the Crystal Lake Ordinance. Crystal Lake is a beautiful, clear 120-acre lake in Sheboygan County. And 2 years ago, they said, look, the wake boats are tearing up our lake. We're going to put in an ordinance that would say that you are not able to use ballast in a boat. You're not banning a boat. Boats are beautiful. You can take them out. You can fish from them. You can water ski from them. You can tube. But what the Crystal Lake Ordinance says is you're not able to load up with ballast and drive in a pre-plane condition to create excessive artificial wake. That ordinance, I know we talked with the town chair there, and he said, hey, when we put that ordinance through, we had a public hearing. We had a very vocal but very small group of wake boat enthusiasts who really wanted to advocate for their sport. But he said at the end of the day, it was 7-1 to advocate. They put the ordinance through, and if you talk to John Roos, the town chair, he'd say it's really the best thing we did for our lake. Mm-hmm. These local ordinances, they're allowed by the DNR. So what we're encouraging people to do is if you have an issue on your lake that you regularly fish or live on or recreate on, and you want to be able to look and do something about this, we can talk with you about what to do to get a local ordinance. Since the state did not jump in with any common sense reforms here this last few months of the session, a lot of townships up north are now moving forward with their own ordinances. Mm-hmm. And so town of Winchester, which is way up there in the north, I think they've got about 60 lakes within town of Winchester. About 10 days ago, their town board passed an ordinance like Crystal Lake that prohibits the wake surfing. So this is something that citizens, fishermen can come together and really work this issue. I just want to add one other thought on that. The fishing community has the power to get regulations in place, both either locally or statewide. The issue is getting the fishing community united, because we are the biggest economic engine in the state as it relates to tourism. And if we just got 10% of the fishermen or fisherwomen across Wisconsin to come together on this, we have a big voice in Madison that can knock out the big dollars of the wake boat manufacturers. So I'll pause there. I gave a mouthful of
I don't know, like 1 or 2 points. Yeah, for sure. But all of that is really good stuff. And to be honest, it was all a very cohesive thought. And honestly, I was really absorbed into it. Mm-hmm. So that's why we let you go. But I am going to actually go way back to kind of where you started and kind of bring up this question. So you were talking about how, you put the cameras down and there's these deep weed beds and that they are changing. No more weeds. It looks like the surface of the moon. Now, I think the reason it's important to go back to this point is so often as a person who is so excited about summer and swimming and beaches and sandy areas and fun, that sometimes we forget what a healthy ecosystem looks like. And sometimes we assume that a sandy bottom with nothing on it might be part of that healthy ecosystem. And so, when we're talking about, I guess, that lake bottom and that big change, I guess maybe this is too vague of a question. I mean, what does a healthy lake look like?
Well, I know what a lot of lakes looked like before wake boats really took off here the last 5 years. And I think that they were ones, in my case, what I've heard from fishermen across the state is the deep weed beds. Is that those, when you have the longer weeds that are going up, that'll be maybe this, the stalks may run 4, 5, 6, 7 feet tall. Those are, those have a lot of surface area on them. And so if you get concussive impact from very strong waves coming through, those are ones that are getting uprooted and ripped out. That's, I think, our big concern. And then the secondary major concern, it really isn't secondary, is you get that downward prop wash rolling into the bottom and you are going to blast away any fish nests. And so there's a very popular recreation lake outside Yellowstone Park in Montana. And this year they did something real interesting. They had a big battle with their local wake boat community on this, but they got regulations in that you are not allowed to start wake surfing on that lake until after July 1st. And the reason is that gave all of their native species a chance to get through spawn. That's an idea that we haven't really explored here in Wisconsin, but something to consider as well.
So then I hear you talking about the fish nets or nests. And I guess in my mind, I was making the assumption that it had to do with maybe those little fry as they're growing because they're living in those deep weeds, or maybe even the sticks and stuff, the brush that gathers along the shoreline, maybe that starts to get pushed off. And so those ecosystems aren't there for those baby fish to grow. But then you also have less forage.
Oh, you're exactly correct on that. The whole food chain starts with these weed beds. It really does. And those deep weed beds are the areas, again, as you said, it's where the fry go to hide. It's where the intermediate fish are. It creates nice forage for the pike and the larger fish too that can come along there. The whole ecosystem is tied in with the weeds. It really is.
Well, and I know that this is maybe coming from the opposite direction from the conversation, because one thing that we really want to hammer home with this is that just because you can't necessarily see the deeper weed beds, there is stuff happening to them. But in the more blunt, in your face happenings, if you go around lakes, you're seeing more and more landowners having to armor their lots because of erosion. And a lot of that has to do, there's some natural erosion, but there again, if you have these weed beds in front of your lot, that holds back sediment so it doesn't erode as much. But if the weeds are gone, and then you constantly have these powerful waves hitting the shoreline, that eats away at your land, so you have less land. And then on top of it, you're having to spend money on landscaping to your own money on landscaping to make sure that other people can enjoy the same lake that you own property on, or that maybe you live down the road and you enjoy all the time. And so there's a whole bunch of things that kind of go into like a circle here that we're seeing a pattern of it's a lot of cost for a little bit of fun.
It's a massive societal cost for all of us. And the latest statistics that are public from National Marine Manufacturers, which are 2020, they published them back then, but they haven't published them since, or made them available to the public, was wake boats made up 4% of their sales of boats in America in year 2020. And so you're really talking about a 4% group that is having negative impacts on the other 96% of lake users. And, I've heard I've been in some different debates and friendly discussions with some wake boaters here over the last year. And, their comment is, hey, the public trust doctrine allows me to bring my boat out on any lake I want and recreate how I want. I think where many of us come back, though, is we say, yeah, but the public trust doctrine also requires the state of Wisconsin to act to protect the resource for all users. And these boats are having a massive outsized impact. Again, I'm going to go back to the analogy to say that these really are kind of like monster trucks being allowed to drive around in public parks. And they're really, causing a lot of havoc for everybody else using that park.
Well, and I'm just gonna come from the other side here. You brought up having friendly discussions, and it's not like anybody is trying to ban these recreational sports like outright. There's areas where it is acceptable, where the bodies of water can handle it for the most part. And so this is more an issue of compromise than just let's just do it in places that can handle it versus just pounding everywhere.
Exactly. And have either of you fished on Lake Mendota near Madison ever?
Once
Not recently.
on the ice. So we didn't meet very many, but we have a lot of friends that live and fish in that area. So
Yeah, and so Mendota as a lake is 10,000 acres. It's not quite a perfect oval or square, but it's 5 miles by 5 miles. And so wake boaters, because I watched some of them last summer, they can go 2 miles offshore on Mendota, have the time of their lives out there, and they're impacting no one. And so for a lake like Mendota, you create a zone out in the middle of it. That's absolutely perfect. When you're talking, though, about some of these smaller lakes, and even the ones that might be 1,000 or 1,200 acres, they have so many bays and fingers and inlets. One of the things we have on Big Cedar is we are 900 acres, but we are like 4 miles long, and we're like a pencil, very narrow. And so when a wakeboarder comes down the middle of that lake, those waves are smashing up very close to both shores. What makes it worse is Big Cedar has a very deep southern basin to it, but in the middle of that basin is a massive sunken island that comes up to about 7-foot depth. And so the wakeboarder comes down and he thinks he's in 90 feet of water, everything's great, but he's rolling over that sunken island, and that's another area on our lake where we've seen all the weeds just get blasted apart. And that's one of my favorite fishing spots. And so again, lakes where it's appropriate, fantastic. One of the things that we're advocating with in Madison now is we're saying we'd like the state to come in and consider legislation that would require the boats to be 500 feet offshore, 500 feet from other boaters, okay? Because that way, let's see, you're moored, you're fishing, you're at your spot. You got to keep, those guys need to stay a little ways away, or else those waves hit hard, and to be in at least 20-foot depth, and have those be as sort of minimum protections for the lakes and rivers across Wisconsin. That still leaves a lot of water for wakeboaters to do their sport. But at the same time, it really goes a long way to protecting the resource for everyone else.
The other thing, though, because that does sound really great. That sounds, you were talking about compromise and everything, but I'm still honestly distracted kind of back. So I'm sorry. I'm going back.
Okay.
You were talking about your lake and that it's long and narrow, and that you'd also made reference to the river systems. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that are like, well, it's moving water anyways, those. So I guess I was really interested to hear that some of those effects, and I guess with the shorelines being so close, man, maybe it's even magnified with those waves. But I had never really totally considered the river aspect of this.
So Town of Wolf River a number of years ago, I'm guessing you mentioned the Wolf. Do you fish the Wolf a lot?
We did for almost a decade. We just moved up towards Anigo.
Okay.
But we fished
Wolf
from
River is my
Shawano.
home.
Yeah, Shawano to Winnebago. We're very familiar with.
Okay. So back in 2009, Town of Wolf River, there's a half-mile stretch running close through the town in the populated area. And they put in a no-wake ordinance. And this was really before the wake boats came about. But they put in the no-wake ordinance because a lot of the boats were speeding through, generating big wake. And it was causing a couple things. It was causing a lot of hazard with people in small boats, people, wading along the banks, etc., swimming. And it was causing a lot of problems for people fishing because those waves, there's just nowhere for that power to go. So Town of Wolf River put in a slow no wake for a half-mile stretch of their river. There was a group of power boaters that then filed a suit against the Town of Wolf River. And they said, you're unconstitutionally impinging on our right to use the river. So the suit went to an administrative law judge. Administrative law judge said, no, Town of Wolf River is well within their rights to have a slow no wake. And then the powerboat group appealed, went to, I think it was Winnebago County Circuit Court. And the circuit court judge they had a trial on this. State of Wisconsin weighed in on behalf of Town of Wolf River. And the essential takeaway was this: Town of Wolf River has a vested interest in ensuring the safety and health of that stretch of river. And as such, they have the ability under Wisconsin law to have that slow no wake stretch. And so that was really the seminal case in this. It's never been challenged by anyone else, any of these type of ordinance since. And it really, in the state of Wisconsin, all the public proclamations from both legislators and the DNR has been, yeah, there's a legitimate towns and lake districts and rivers, areas along towns have a legitimate interest in protecting their waterfront.
Yeah.
More than you probably wanted, but I think it's important to note that there is legal precedent. It was kind of an open and shut case, and the state of Wisconsin came in and intervened and said, we support Wolf River. They're doing exactly the right thing here with what they've done. So
I don't think it was too much information, to be honest. I was digesting it all, thinking, like, I mean, as somebody who's been on the river,
yeah,
and especially if
We've
you've
gone
been
through there.
well, and especially when the water level goes up, right?
Yeah.
And so
Oh,
like
yeah.
spring, and there's some years that the water's really high, and you could like flutter your fingers in the water, and I swear a wake would go halfway into the bayou and wherever, because I don't know, when the water is that high, sometimes that happens, right? But and so it's easy to just get into the assumption of like, well, the riverbanks, they can handle that, and they're meant for flowing water, or the waves go over it anyways. Or, you know, I think rivers are kind of tumultuous in some ways, and so it's easy to assume like they're fine, you know. But I guess this is kind of where it goes back to the point that you were making before this, that even if you're not going to do this kind of boating in the river systems, you know, there might be a different lake, there might be a different waterway that you could do something like this. And so it's about kind of matching your sport to the waterway that you're going to. You know, I mean, if you're going to, I don't know, a tiny little boat launch, you're not going to bring your giant boat, you're going to bring your kayak, right? It's just about the right tool for the job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, I just like that there's still an opportunity for people without blowing the fishermen out of the water. Selfishly, I am sick of pulling my anchor.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk a different one. You know, for those who are listening, with Big Green Lake, that's a massive lake, super deep, huge. Up there is plenty of space to clear out an area in the middle of Big Green, a nice big play area for those folks. But just keep them away from the shores, keep them away from the shallows. There's a place that the walleye fishermen love called Bishop's Bar, which is a huge bar off of there that comes up to about 10-foot depth. But that thing, they all tell me, has been really shaved down. Doesn't have vegetation. A couple guys swear that maybe a foot of that has eroded off from the wake boats running over it. So, you know, again, there's areas where this sport can be enjoyed. Absolutely.
That's crazy to think about all those sunken islands. And I mean, this is a perfect time for that awareness because, you know, we're talking a lot these days about graph systems and, you know, what people can see out on the water. And quite frankly, generally, it's more than ever. I think I just saw an article about a murder was solved from the 70s because they found the car in the river and they pulled it out, right? Because somebody's fishing graph, right? Yep. But you know, it's crazy to say, oh, the fishermen go out and say, oh, a foot has been shaved off. But these days, with electronics the way that they are so precise that it is almost easy for the fishermen to see these little nuances. You know, we might not have noticed before when a foot of depth had changed or something because maybe our graphs were off or however it read. But these days, things are so accurate. I mean, that's important to listen to these people who are out there all the time.
Well, and speaking as part of the scientific community, you know, that side of this for me, you know, we have to listen to people who recreate, especially people like anglers and hunters, because they spend a lot of hours out in the environment that, you know, ultimately people like myself are trying to conserve. You know, and the fact of the matter is Emily hit the nail on the head. The equipment that the anglers and hunters are using nowadays is the same equipment now that I'm using out of my office. You know, that's what a lot of state agencies are using to conduct their science, because it's affordable, and the community is using it, and so why not? And it's good, and so why not the state? And so everybody's stuff matches up. And so when we can talk to the community and get little stuff like, hey, I've been fishing this bar for 20 years, and now, and you know, we understand the lake goes up and down, but here's a map from 10 years ago, because that's when mapping came out for the general public, and here's a map now, and you can even put in the water level changes over that last decade, and you can see, and all of that information is available just to the common public. So, you know, it's crazy that, you know, we can do that now.
Yeah, the technology is really something, and that was something that kind of helped me get motivated on this issue. Was I checked with some of the, I'm not a big ice fisherman, okay? I do it a little bit on a nice day when everything's right, but you know, I checked with some of the ice fishermen down on Big Cedar a year ago, and these guys all have the weed beds marked on GPS. And as they said, you know, they dig the holes. A lot of these guys use, and Josh, Emily, help me out. Is it a Vexlar? What's the camera name? Yeah. They all had the cameras, and they just said, we lowered them down, and where's the weed beds? Where did they go? So we're trying to kind of solve that. Now, one of the things I will tell you is I do get asked by some of the wake boat guys, can you prove 100% that this is that this sport is causing this? And I say no, but I would say that the science right now is really coming pretty strong, that there is so much sediment. Have you met Mike Arrowood with Walleyes for Tomorrow?
No, we haven't met him in person, but we know of it.
So Mike has a theory. One of Mike's theories is, and this will probably play to you, Josh, with some of your water quality studies, that there is so much sediment getting stirred up in certain lakes from these boats, and it's landing on the leaves of the taller aquatic vegetation, and it's blocking the photosynthesis and then causing the weed growth to be stunted. Again, a lot of different theories out there, but put all that aside, put all our fishing stuff aside. What?
I've wondered that. Thank you for saying that. Because I've had my Aquaview down there, and sometimes you see so much sediment on the leaves. And I'm like, okay, if that was a ground plant, it could never live. And I'm like, do water plants work the same? That's a great point. Thank you for saying that.
Well, there's another line of thought. A lot of lakes down here in southern Wisconsin back in the 1960s, when they didn't want to have weeds and we didn't quite have as much environmental, awareness on things, they used arsenic and dumped it into the lakes to knock out the weeds. And arsenic is not something that degrades. It gets buried in the sediment. And so there's some theories that certain areas that were arsenicked out back in the 60s now had weed growth come in over the last 40, 50 years. But now the wake boats have stirred up that sediment and got the arsenic released out. Again, all of these are things that we really would like University of Wisconsin and the state and Governor Evers to and DNR obviously goes without saying to step up and start taking a look at.
So those are big topics. And so we appreciate those people in those jobs that hopefully can accomplish that. As far as our average everyday person, what we're not going to do is go to boat ramps and shake our fists at people that are
Right.
in ways that we don't like. Right. But what can we do?
Okay. So a couple things. I would encourage you to visit our website, lakesatstake.org. And if you have a few bucks to donate, I know everybody gets solicited on everything, but we are nonprofit. We are all volunteers and we are making a difference, but we do have costs that go directly. Really, our major cost is working in Madison and being a voice for this issue. As I mentioned, we are bipartisan. We have both Republicans and we have both Trump and Biden voters on our board. And what I've realized is this is a bipartisan issue. I mean, it's one that a lot of people agree on, and we're one issue only. This is check your politics at the door, check your egos at the door. Our goal is to try to bring awareness to this issue. So visit our website. If you can spare a couple bucks, even $10 is fantastic for us, because we do have some costs involved with the activities we do. Second thing I would say is Wisconsin Conservation Congress is coming up. And the last year, now I'm going to plead somewhat of ignorance on the whole process because it's sort of a mystery how these ordinances work up for ballot initiatives, how they work up from the county level to the state and then ultimately to the DNR, NRB. But last year there were some initiatives on wake surfing, and they're really on regulation of wake surfing. And those initiatives generally passed by about a 70 to 30% margin. And the reason that it was that close last year was that the wake boat industry made a concerted effort to get their people out to vote in the WCC. There's going to be, I know everybody's focused on the forward-facing sonar and everything going on with Garmin and stuff on that initiative this year, but there are going to be a couple wake boat initiatives on there relating to ballast tank, aquatic invasive species, distance from shore. Make your voice known. If you think you would like to see some common sense regulation of wake boats, please get, WCC hits online in second week of April, I think, second or third week of April. Get on and vote. So I think those are two ways. Third way, if you have lakes that you fish regularly, call up the town board chair of those of the jurisdiction of those lakes and ask them, have they considered any type of regulations for wake surfing, and start the dialogue, because local towns have the power. And right now, Madison has said, we're not going to step in statewide. We're going to let the towns run this, and the towns can take action.
Yep.
And the towns can take action. The amazing thing about, people in a small town right now is if you've never been to a town board meeting, some of these meetings are so small.
Right.
People would be shocked at the impact that their one voice can have. And I think that's a huge barrier that keeps people from going, is they're never going to listen to me. But when you might be the only citizen participant in the room, they listen. It's actually really amazing. So urging everybody, especially in those small towns, to go out and have a say for their lakes, because the lake itself cannot be there, right? That sounds crazy, but there's a lot that we can do, and the more examples that we have to point to, like you said, I think Crystal Lake in Sheboygan County, all these little places, that's some great stuff that's going on, and the more that we have to point to is the more that we can do great stuff for lakes and great stuff for fishing. And I guess that's what we're all here for.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Wisconsin, if you travel around the country, and there's very few states that have the natural resource we have with our lakes and rivers. It's an unbelievable resource. It's incredible fishing. And I think we're just trying to get people aware to make sure that we don't look back 3, 4, 5 years from now and say, wow, we really missed the boat on this. The fish stocks are way down. The fish habitat's been really decimated in certain areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's really crazy. And I guess this is a little bit unrelated to the topic, but you said way earlier in the show that you do fish photography. If people are interested in that, do you put that out there anywhere that people can check that out?
Yeah, I do. I don't have much out. I have more actually concert videos out there from stuff. But what I would say is this: what I'll do is, if does this show get recorded and then playback, or no? Is this just live? Yeah, I'll put in when you post it up on Facebook, I'll drop in the link to a video. I have a video from 2014 of that area of the lake. It's really fun to watch. Massive fish everywhere, massive bait fish everywhere. And then I've got a video I'll put in the other link, which will show you what that looks like today.
Oh.
It's a really stark difference, no question.
Wow.
I'm not even excited for that because I know it's going to be sad.
Well, watch the 2014 video. That was a lot of fun.
Oh my goodness. Oh gosh. Well, this has been so awesome talking with you about all of this because I think this is something that affects everybody in all of the state, and honestly even states beyond. So if you're not even in Wisconsin, keep your ears and your eyes peeled on what's going on here, because you never know what can happen in your state as well. And for the people at home, can you remind us one more time that website, and if you're on social media otherwise?
Yeah, so it's lakesatstake.org. And we're on Facebook at Lakes at Stake, Wisconsin. And Emily, you mentioned other states. I just want to add one last coda here. State of Vermont, about a month ago, put in wake surf regulations on all their lakes, 800 lakes. And what they said was 770 of them are just too small for wake surfing. 30 of them we're going to allow, and we're going to create a zone 500 feet offshore, 20 feet of water. That's now the state law in Vermont. Michigan last week, a group of their legislators just introduced a bill. So all the lakes and rivers in Michigan, you would have to be 500 feet from shore and to wake surf and 20-foot depth of water. So this stuff is starting to catch fire as people are getting active and understanding kind of what's at stake here.
Well, and if those kind of regs are good enough for our Uper brothers and sisters, it can be good enough for Wisconsin, I think. Hopefully everybody agrees.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If it just means good fishing, I'm in. Oh my gosh, awesome. Well, we are looking forward to those videos that you're going to put into those comments. And we are looking forward to summer and not looking forward to being blown out of my anchor spots by wake boats. But hopefully everyone will get out and recreate in ways that they enjoy. Because that is the point of it.
Right.
And in the meantime, we are waiting for waterways to continue to warm up because, gosh, I don't know if we're quite at, I was going to say summer temps. We're nowhere near that, right? But, we are just letting all that ice melt, getting on all of these fresh bodies of water and making sure our boat's ready to keep up with us.
Yep.
So, Scott, thank you so much for being here with us this evening.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and to everybody at home, thank you guys for being here as well, because that is always a huge part of the fun. And otherwise, looking forward to seeing everyone on next week's edition of The Night Bite.
Night, everybody.
Thank you.